Pastor Heather, and it is a joy to be with you this morning. I'm offering a reflection on an everyday object during Lent. Pastor Amanda and I are sharing this, so some weeks you'll see me, some weeks you'll see Pastor Amanda, and we're just taking this time to reflect on some of the objects that we find in our everyday life, but how they can connect us to our spirituality and to our relationship with God. So thank you for joining me. Today I'm going to talk about coins. I brought some quarters with me. You probably can't see them. This is just a regular, like, eagle quarter. I'll see if you can see it. Yep, see, just like the regular quarter. And then I was digging through the quarters that we have in our like change dish, and I found one of the state quarters from Virginia. And I found some other ones, but I didn't bring them. Anyway, quarters are something that most of us have at least kicking around our house. We don't use them quite as much as we used to, as we're moving more and more into digital currency. But certainly we all recognize them, especially the quarters with eagles, those very traditional quarters. I remember, are any of you old enough to remember the bicentennial quarters that came out in 1976 to commemorate 200 years of the United States of America? I was a child at that time. I won't tell you how old I was because then you'll know how old I am now. But anyway, I was a child at the time, but they were a big deal if you remember, if you were around when they came out. And my husband's grandparents actually saved a couple rolls of specifically the bicentennial quarters for him. And there was a special gift, not because they were more valuable than regular quarters monetarily, but just because they were these commemorative quarters that were limited edition. Well, when we were in college, we no longer had easy access to a washer and dryer. We had to go to the laundromat, and the laundromat only took quarters. And so you can guess probably what ended up happening to those rolls of bicentennial quarters that my husband's grandparents had gifted him. At some point, they stopped being special quarters to us, and they just became quarters that would help us do laundry. Like many college students, we were really broke, and coming up with laundry money wasn't always easy. And so we took those quarters and we spent them on laundry. Every once in a while we talk about it. It's been decades since that happened. And every once in a while we talk about how easy it was just to spend those quarters as if they were regular quarters. And I don't think either one of us actually regret the using of those coins to do laundry. But I think maybe we regret not having that symbol of his grandparents' care for him. The quarters were about more than just their monetary value, or even the bicentennial quarter. They were about care that my husband's grandparents had for him. But that story reminds me that money has many different meanings. Coins have many different meanings, not just coins, right? But dollar bills and our bank accounts, our debit or credit cards, all those things have different meanings to us in different contexts. And there's a story in the Gospels where Jesus is questioned about coins. A group of people come up and they want to trick Jesus. They want to get him in trouble, which happens to him an awful lot. And so they ask him, they say, should we pay taxes to Caesar? And they're trying to back him into a corner, because if Jesus says, yes, you should pay taxes to Caesar, he could be accused of being loyal to Caesar, who calls himself a god, versus being loyal to Yahweh, or the one God. And if he says, no, you shouldn't pay taxes, he can get himself in trouble with the government, who will say, well, you have to pay taxes. So they're trying to back Jesus into a corner. And as he so often does when backed into a corner, he answers the question in a completely different way. And he says, who's on your quarter? Now, I'll show you this side of my quarter. Not that you don't know who's on there, right? But George Washington's on ours. The answer in Jesus's time was Caesar. Caesar was on the coins. And Jesus says, give to Caesar what is Caesar's and give to God what is God. So go ahead and pay your taxes. it doesn't mean that in paying your taxes you're more loyal to Caesar or think that Caesar is your God. But make sure that you're giving to God what belongs to God. And so this raises the question, what does belong to God? If it's not our taxes, what is it that we should give to God? And that's where Jesus leaves this open ended question. That's not just a challenge to the people who were trying to back him into that corner, but I think is a challenge to us today. What is it that belongs to God? Money is one of those things, I think, that is really tricky because it can sometimes, for us, replace the role of God in our lives. We can become more loyal to money, maybe, than we are to God. And I think there's reasons for this, right? Money is important. Money buys us our food and our shelter. Money can do amazing things for us, like send us on vacation. Money might help us send our kids to college or send ourselves to college, right? There's reasons that money is important. And I think Jesus' answer in saying, give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar, isn't asking us to completely give up caring about money. He doesn't say, for example, don't care about taxes and the repercussions that happen to you if you don't pay for them. He's just saying, keep it in its proper perspective. And Lent is a season, the season of Lent, these 40 days leading up to Easter, where we get to examine our lives and reorder if we need to do some reordering. And I often find in my own life and in the life of others that money is one of those places where we maybe need some regular reordering, right? A revisiting of how we're relating to money in our lives. Um, is our money inspiring generosity in us? Is our money inspiring us to care for others? Do we have a sense of gratitude about the money we have and recognize that everything we have comes from God? So, do we approach our money with gratitude? Do we approach it with humility? Maybe recognizing our privilege if we have more material goods than another person, or maybe making sure that envy doesn't creep in, right? It's so easy to look at other people and say, oh my gosh, they have so much more than I do. So there's all kinds of places that we might need to do some reordering in our life. And Lent is a time that offers us that space. There's three traditional practices in the season of Lent: prayer, fasting, and almsgiving. And I think all of them could be helpful spiritual practices to reorder our relationship with money. So, of course, one of the ways to start is through prayer. It can be prayers of gratitude, right? So maybe all day when you encounter money of any kind, maybe today you practice just offering prayers of gratitude. Thank you, God, for all of these resources I have. Prayer, it might be a place if you're experiencing envy of what others have. Maybe, again, praying gratitude for what you do have, or just spending that time in prayer with God, asking where your envy is coming from. If you're finding, for example, that you place all of your security in your bank account or in money, maybe spending some time with God in prayer, asking those questions about where our security really comes from. You know, what would happen, for example, if all of our money was wiped out of our bank account for some reason? This has happened to people throughout history. Where would our security be if suddenly we found ourselves with no coins whatsoever? Another practice in Lent is fasting. And fasting can be really tricky, and I'm not going to dive into it too much in this video because I think in our current culture, fasting needs some nuancing. But an idea might be to practice fasting, not from food, but from buying anything for a day. How does that feel? Are you able to do it? What happens when you want to purchase something and you have to hit pause for that day, right? And those are great questions then to bring to God through prayer. And then the third one is almsgiving, which is how we love our neighbor by giving to our neighbor. And this is one of the practices of Lent. So, again, as we reorder throughout the season of Lent, our relationship maybe to our money, what does it mean to find places of generosity? Even sometimes when we don't have very much, maybe our generosity isn't actually with coins. Maybe there are other things in our life that we are generous with. Um, so I invite you uh, throughout this next week to notice the coins in your life, and to spend some time in prayer and examine, maybe spend some time in fasting, and spend some time in looking at what it would mean to be generous with your money. And if you're struggling, one of the places I always circle back to is to start with gratitude. Just be grateful for what you have and offer that prayer to God and see what it opens up in you. And then follow that opening and that life giving place, and see how that begins to change your relationship, maybe with money, and your relationship with God. Well, friends, blessings be upon you this week. I would love to hear some of your reflections down below. I'm going to post a question in the comments, and ask that if you feel led that you respond. And I'm just going to ask if you have a story about money that you remember. So the story I shared with you is just that story about spending those quarters that my husband's grandparents had saved for him. Do you have a story like that about money? Maybe completely different. Maybe losing money, maybe going to pay and like suddenly you don't have your wallet with you, or a time where maybe you got some extra generosity that you weren't expecting and it was a blessing. So if you have a story about money that you are willing to share, post it in the comments down below. I can't wait to read those, and I will be holding you in prayer. If you have prayer requests, reach out to me. You can put them in the comments. If they're private, you can private message them to me. I would love to be praying for you this week. So blessings be upon your week. See you later. Bye.